Welcome to Unscripted. I'm your host, Addisyn Uehling. In this series, we have candid one-on-one conversations with physicians about common topics that doctors experience. On today's show, we will be sitting down with Dr. Amy Bader to talk about naturopathic medicine on this episode of Unscripted. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you please start by sharing a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to join you today. Like you said, I'm Dr. Amy Bader, and I'm a naturopathic doctor. I have been practicing for 24 years. I'm also an assistant professor at the Naturopathic Medical School here in Portland, Oregon, and I'm a clinical faculty member for 18 years now. I've had a private practice since I got out of my residency 23 years ago, and I've seen thousands and thousands of patients. Naturopathic medicine is a really lovely subset of medical practice. We are like primary care meets natural medicine. So we're the go-to experts in what's actually really good natural medicine advice and what, quite frankly, is a little bit of hoo-ha.
Yeah. That's awesome. Kind of how was your residency experience? Kind of tell us a little bit about your training and your medical school.
Yeah. So first of all, naturopathic medical school is like any other medical school setting. We do all of our pre-med. I actually was a business major at Berkeley, and so I had to go back and finish 2.5 more years of undergrad when I decided to be a physician. So I had 6.5 years of undergrad, and then I did 4 years of naturopathic medical school, which is, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of training. So once that was done, I entered my residency, and our residencies are outpatient residencies. We're not in hospitals. And so in a way that's an easier ask because we're working maybe 12 to 16 hour days instead of like 72-hour shifts. But, it was grueling. It was really, really hard. Like on the heels of 4 years of craziness academically and clinically and board exams, and then starting that residency without really being able to take a breath. Quite frankly, it was exhausting. It was exhausting. Yeah.
That's awesome. So kind of why did you choose your specialty? Why did you choose to go into naturopathic medicine?
I think part of it has to do with just my path through life. I grew up in California, and my mother was actually diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia when I was about 14 years old, and there wasn't a lot to do in terms of oncology treatments at that point. So her oncologist actually encouraged her to do whatever she could just to stay healthy. And so my parents kind of started this track through the world of medicine, both, conventional and alternative, without any judgment, just like, okay, let's go to who's good. Let's get good advice. And, she saw so many different kinds of physicians and practitioners, like Chinese medicine and kind of functional medicine doctors, and conventional. And her leukemia stayed super, super, super. Matter of fact, she's 84 now. It's been stable for 40 something years.
That's awesome.
Oncologists have been thrilled. They're like, just keep doing what you're doing. But she got very good nutritional advice and stress management, like all of these things. And so I saw a very broad kind of swath of what medicine can offer. And it's not just one thing, right? It's not just one conventional thing. And so when I decided to leave my accounting career and go into medicine, which I think was truly a very heartfelt calling. It's really what I spent all my free time doing, was studying medicine when I was an accountant. When I did that, I really decided I wanted to bring expertise across the board to whomever was going to be my future patient. And I thought I would be doing that by going to conventional medical school and then learning other specialty areas on the side. But then I found naturopathic medicine, which is literally the combination of both grueling, rigorous medical school, plus years of training in nutrition, herbal medicine, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And can you kind of like talk about the difference between naturopathic medicine and just like standard that doctors use right now or usually?
Yeah, I mean, we really function, most of us, like a primary care physician. Our training is, and our licensure in most states is really around acting like a primary care physician. And so, quite frankly, some days I go to work, it doesn't look any different than my MD counterpart.
Mhm.
I'm putting people on statins or hypertensive medications, that kind of thing. But I
Yeah.
think where we really are a little bit different is that, when we work with a patient, we really have a mindset in tandem of like, what's the root cause of this person's ailment? Are they do they need some guidance with, shifting to a Mediterranean diet? Are they not sleeping well? Are they not, managing their stress well? Are they dehydrated all the time? Like, we're not just about like, oh, we'll swap a drug for an herb. That's not how we work.
Yeah.
We're about what is the root cause of this person's health conditions, and let's in tandem, while we manage their symptoms with medication or herbs or whatnot, help them get that solved, because the goal is for them to not be needing to take a bunch of stuff. The goal is for them to live a lifestyle and make choices that help them be free of disease, if you
Mhm. Yeah, that's really incredible. I didn't personally know that.
will.
So what would you say some of the advantages that you've seen, or maybe it's helped you when you pursue that naturopathic versus the just drugs?
Well, I think there's never been a more important time for those of us who are trained this way to be in the world. I have a good friend who's an internal medicine doctor. We share a lot of patients, and
Mhm.
people are constantly coming to him going, "Hey, I want to take this herb, or what do you think of this diet?" And he's like, "Go see Amy. Go see Amy." Because nobody can know all the things. But in this world where social media is constantly streaming all kinds of information, some of it dangerous, some of it bogus. And people are making decisions to treat themselves because they're somehow resonating with an influencer versus a physician. I think that those of us who have been trained in both areas of medicine are crucial right now to
Mhm.
have on a care team. So, my literal job is to know the difference between what's real medicine, whether it comes from a tradition of like Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, or even more what we know more from a modern herbal perspective or whatnot, and what, quite frankly, is dangerous or ineffective. So I think, we're a really important person to have on a care team, especially if someone is inclined to want to pursue some aspects of natural medicine.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like you have faced any disadvantages or kind of pushback from this idea in this naturopathic medicine?
Yeah, and not so much lately, but in the very beginnings of my career, we're evidence based just like any physician. However, in the more recent, like in the last decade, I would tell you that the research has exploded in the world of natural medicine. Like the things that we have been saying for decades, like the microbiome is really important. Like all the research is now supporting what we've been saying.
Mhm.
Remember, 20 something years ago when I was in school and my professors saying the microbiome in the mouth and the gut are very important in terms of what they do in terms of disease. We got all kinds of names called that, like that's BS and that. But we just knew. We knew from our patients who had chronic disease, and we were treating these very fundamental core pieces of their physiology, and they were getting better. It was
Mhm.
like we were doing our own research experiment, and so thankfully we have become better known. People are starting to understand we're very well trained. People are starting to understand the things we've been yabbering about for the last 40 years are true. The science is showing that it's real. And so I think, we've come a long way, but, there's still some pushback occasionally. And I think it's mostly out of ignorance. I think there's a lot of people who really don't understand that we go to 4 years of medical school and we are put through the ringer. We work hard to really know how to be responsible with natural medicine.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's becoming a much more commonly known topic and like very popular, especially with
Mhm.
social media, kind of like you said, there's some misleading things, but then there's a lot of things that are very true and they're becoming way more popular.
Yeah, and sometimes I will say, like, if you're a patient who has a chronic disease or you are on medications, seeking the advice of someone who's trained very well is important because maybe your medications don't play well with an herb or some advice you got online,
Yeah,
or maybe for you it's not safe, or you it won't be effective, or there's something else you need to think about. So I do think that we play an important role.
absolutely. Yep. How do you feel like going back to your practice, does insurance work the same as other medicine?
In some states, yes, and in some states, no. I'm licensed in Washington, Oregon, and California. In Oregon and Washington, we take insurance and are considered primary care providers like anybody else, which is very frustrating. And I have to do pre-auths and like all these things. Like, oh my gosh, California is very different. We're not necessarily in the primary care loop down there yet. I almost dread the day we are because I hate the whole insurance game. But down there, I have more of a cash practice kind of situation with those patients. But up here, we almost everybody's insurance plan covers us, and so there's really not that much difference. Sometimes a patient will land in our office because they were assigned us as a primary care home, and they don't even know what we do. They're like, "Oh, wow, you do all this other stuff too? Like, cool." So, yeah.
That's really awesome. Are there any other legal challenges that you kind of face with this naturopathic view?
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge that we have is that nationally speaking, our license laws are a little bit different state to state. So there's not a uniformity in terms of how we can practice. So, for instance, in some states, we have the full breadth of pharmacological, prescribing. Like I can literally prescribe anything an MD or DO counterpart can in certain states. But
Mhm.
in other states like Colorado or California, for example, there's loopholes you either need to jump through in order to prescribe medications or you're not allowed to prescribe medications. And it's fine. I think a lot of us are very, very happy working with an MD, sharing patient care, doing what we love, which is really like lifestyle, nutrition, herbal medicine, those kinds of things, and just knowing how to do it safely. In some states, however, we don't have a license law yet. And it's not, it's a minority of states, but because there's no law that defines us and there's no governing body,
Uh,
that's like the Wild West. And in those states, there are people who call themselves naturopathic doctors who are not.
mm,
They went to like a mail order school and took a few classes on some online platform. They did not go to 4 years of medical school. They did not do a residency. They have not been well trained, but they're out there saying they're equivalent to us. And I think that's why we legally need to really keep pressing to get those license laws passed so that there's not people out there mimicking our name, but not, don't have even remotely the training that we have.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And kind of going back to the natural, like holistic approach, can you give us some examples of how that's really been helpful as compared to maybe just going to the doctor and getting some
Yeah.
drugs, you know?
It's so funny that you asked me this question because I was just telling my medical students yesterday about a case I had when I was first out of school. And I think it speaks volumes as to how we operate.
Mm,
First of all, people are not just symptoms. They're people who've had an experience and they have a lens they look through at the world and they've walked this path. And like I had this patient come in who did not want to be there. His wife forced him to come and see me. He thought I was some kind of quack. And he was like, I don't know what you think you can do to help me that 5 other doctors haven't been able to do. And he had a situation where for about 3 or 4 years prior to seeing me, he had gotten up every single morning and had a vomiting episode that would last about an hour every morning, every morning. And he had seen an internal medicine doctor, 3 GIs, 3 gastroenterologists. He had a general practitioner. Like he had had 12 medications tried. He'd had every single lab and scope and scan known to man multiple times. Nobody could figure out why he was throwing up. Not a single medication changed his symptoms. And so he sat down in front of me and I said, I heard this story. And I said, can you tell me about the year in your life before this started? And I remember a look of surprise on his face because he said, nobody's asked me that.
Wow.
I said, well, and I'm asking you now. I mean, I was already kind of like, because he was a little bit combative when he sat down. And he said, well, my mom died, my best friend died, my brother died, my dog died, and I almost lost my business and had to declare bankruptcy. And I said, I don't think it's your stomach.
Whoa.
I think it's grief. And so I chose some medicines from Europe that we use that are kind of low dose plant medicines that are plants that are known to treat a broken heart. And I've used those with him. They're made in Belgium. They're beautiful. I asked him to eat a Mediterranean style of diet, and I put him on a probiotic. He came back a month later and told me about his month. And he said over the first 2 weeks, he slowly stopped vomiting. It became less aggressive, and then it started skipping days. And he said in the last 10 days, he hadn't thrown up at all. And
Wow.
he was really feeling better. And I had some hope. And within 6 months, he had stopped vomiting altogether. He had lost 20 pounds. He had stopped snoring. His wife let him move back in the bedroom. They planned the trip to China. They had canceled because he was throwing up. They planned a trip to Europe. And it was so funny. And I said, I think we're done. I think we treated what we needed to treat. And so I wished him well. And I said, come back and find me if you need me again. And his wife became a patient. And, for years I worked with her and some other things. And she said, it's so funny. Sometimes I have to remind him he even had that. It was such a natural escape from it that he almost forgot he'd been through it. And she's like, sometimes I have to laugh that I have to remind him. But, his life profoundly changed. And it was just because someone hadn't asked him that question.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's where I think holism is so important.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. That's kind of a testament of the naturopathic. There is definitely a place for synthetic drugs, right? But how that can be treated, maybe a natural way first, is so incredible. Or that was doctors couldn't figure out, and then you could do a natural medicine. That's really awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And I pulled from another tradition. I pulled from a European anthroposophical tradition on that, which is basically a 5,000-year-old, European version of what Chinese medicine is. But it was a simple question and a relatively simple treatment. It just was treating the cause.
Yes.
It was the cause. And I said to him, I don't think you're swallowing what life has given you. It's just too much.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. So, yeah.
Wow, that's really incredible.
Yeah.
And how, kind of going back to that, how do you address concerns from patients when it comes to choosing synthetic drugs, and natural remedies? How do you combat the unwillingness, right, to hear you out?
Yeah. Well, quite frankly, the patients who come to me are less willing to take a drug. Sometimes I have to talk them into taking the drug. I spend half my day trying to convince people to take a drug. We have a system in our medicine that we call the therapeutic order. And you can picture a triangle. And the foundation is things like eating healthy foods and getting sleep and being hydrated. And then we move up the rung to things like, nutritional supplements that are safe, and then up to herbal medicine and whatnot. At the tippy top would be things like very strong pharmaceuticals or procedures or whatnot. But we look at that triangle in our mind's eye with every single patient. Where do I need to start with this patient? Because let's say somebody comes in with ragingly high cholesterol, hypertension. I spend half my day talking them into taking a statin and a hypertensive medication that day, then they come back and I'm like, okay, come back in a few weeks. Let's see how you're feeling. And let's start talking about why you're in this situation to begin with. So then we can start building from the bottom up. We can start looking at, and I will flat out tell you, there's been a lot of patients who I've not just taken off of certain medications, but I've had to take them off of medications because it was no longer appropriate for them to be on medication. Like a blood pressure medication now was making their blood pressure too low. We had to take them off.
Mhm.
Or a patient with type 2 diabetes who no longer needed insulin because their blood sugar was so well controlled that we had to take them off. Their endocrinologist was like, please go off your insulin. So we are we're here to do both. We're here to provide appropriate medical management, and that includes a medication, then so be it. We're also here to build the health of the patient in front of us and treat that root cause. And sometimes that takes time. And so, I kind of look at it as the bookends, and I tell my patients, like, we're going to treat where we are now, and we're going to work toward that goal of optimal health. And we're going to take it one step at a time. And so I think it's a really rational, lovely, holistic way to approach.
Mhm. That's really amazing. Where do you kind of see this naturopathic medicine, this holistic view in about 10 years?
you know, I think with the way that the information highway, so to speak, is full bore. Um, and the fact that AI is going to probably replace a lot of the fundamentals. I mean, I see us as, you know, first of all, I think the human connection that doctors have with their patients is something that we really need to lean into. No computer program is ever going to be able to replace the humanness, the human connection that we can have with our patients.
Yes.
And it will make us efficient in other ways. And so I think we as people have this opportunity to really build on that innate connection we can have with another human as we sit in empathy or just listen to them.
Mhm.
But I think with all of the misinformation in the world, the fact that we can sit here and say, listen, I've seen 40,000 patients and I've seen the use of that particular protocol or herb or whatever. And I know when it's appropriate, when it's not, and I'm here to keep you safe. I think that is to becoming more and more and more important. And I hear from patients a lot, they're becoming increasingly dissatisfied with maybe, regular medicine or whatnot. And I have to remind them, we all have an important role in your healthcare.
Mhm.
The problem is, we're having to move patients through our offices like a turnstile. And, we're having to see more and more patients be able to make our living and work harder and harder. So I think it's all about, like, if we can build care teams where we can all do what we're good at,
Mhm.
I think that we become an irreplaceable resource for our patients so that they're getting the best knowledge. You know, like, I really like I tell my patients all the time, like, you got to go to your cardiologist. That's why God made cardiologists. You got to go to your endocrinologist. Like, we have your rheumatologist is a really important person on your care team. Like, we need to really build an infrastructure, I think, around to surround each of our patients where we bring to the table the best of what we're good at and
Yeah.
keep these people safe and moving forward with their healthcare. And I don't think any one influencer or whatever is going to be able to carry our patients the way we can as physicians.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could go back in time to when you were in training or residency, what's one thing that you really wish you had known?
Oh God, I said it yesterday. I'm like, if someone would have told me about the charting in the pre-auths, I think I would have never done it. It's a drag. It's such a drag. I am absolutely looking forward to the day AI takes over all of that and I can just sit and have a conversation with my person and, like, hear what they have to say and hear their story and, like, oh God, and have a human moment where I'm not worried about clicking boxes on Epic or, like, having these red glaring carrot apps like blaring at me at the side of my chart. I'm really looking forward to that day. But yeah, just like I think anyone is going to tell you, they didn't go into medicine for the money. It's too hard to work. It's the easier way to make a buck. Like, we all went in to be able to help people. We're here
Absolutely.
to help people. And so when we get bogged down with, the administrative stuff, nobody likes that.
Yeah. And
Nobody
it's
likes
just like remembering why you chose to go into that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Exactly.
awesome. Well, what is one thing that you want the audience to take away from today's talk?
Well, I mean, I'm very proud and happy to be here to talk about my little profession within our bigger healthcare system, because I think people either don't know that we exist as a resource, or they have maybe a misconception of what our training is. So I'm very, very grateful to have the opportunity to speak about what we do. But I also want people to know that bodies have the innate capacity to heal themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we can get our patients moving in the direction of really leaning into caring for themselves, we're going to see some amazing things happen. We're going to see them happier, sleeping better, more enthusiastic. They're going to like us better, all of that. And then lastly, I also want to say, for those in the audience who are physicians, residents, whomever,
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to take care of yourself.
Yes.
It is a hard thing for us to do. Nobody who goes to medical school is an easygoing, like whatever. We're hustlers. We're type A's. We push and push and push ourselves to burnout. And, it's that old saying, like, you can't take care of everyone else if you're not taking care of yourself. So I think here, as someone who's been around the block and been doing this for a really, really long time, if you're new in the profession, make a point of doing something for yourself every single day, laughing and laugh. It's good for your microbiome. Like, sleep is important for everything. Like, just make sure you're getting that balance. Because while society thinks we're all out on the golf course and we have an easy, straight profession, we do not.
No.
We do not. So self-care is huge.
Yes. That's so good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom. It was so great to have you on.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank Dr. Amy Bader for joining us today. I hope our conversation has shed some light on the value of having a naturopathic approach in medicine. Stay tuned for more discussions on important topics in the medical field, and one way to do that is to like and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. I'm your host, Addisyn Uehling, and we'll see you next time on Unscripted.